started his job at a large corporation, and there is no dedicated UX research team. That is pretty normal in some companies, right? There isn't, unless it's a very big practice and they decided to invest a lot in design. He said that he admits he's quite inexperienced, having only completed a bootcamp at GA last year. So he doesn't feel legit. Essentially, if I were to summarize what he just typed over here, it's he feels like an imposter, right? Feeling that he doesn't have the experience, but he has the position, right? And he's being seen as the authority and influential figure within the organization. Okay, so DP, I can empathize with your situation, but just to be clear as well, user experience design is a relatively new career option in Singapore, right? If I were to talk about it, I think it's about less than 10 years old in Singapore itself. So I can empathize that situation, and definitely I think it's an uncomfortable situation. But I'll say the fact that you have a job and the fact that you're hired by a large corporation demonstrates that they see something in you, right? Either they see you have a potential, or they see that you have some relevant experience that could help them and serve the needs of the organization. So let's take a moment and recognize that you do have the skills and that you do have some experience that they value, which is why they gave you an offer as a researcher. Okay, so let's admit that first. Okay, so imposter syndrome is a very common problem, and personally, for me, the way I get around it is to reframe this particular situation, right? And it's very simple, right? I, as a coach and as an educator, also feel like there are moments where I might not be the most knowledgeable person in UX. I may not actually know every single thing or every single software that's out there in UX design. So sometimes I feel, or rather in the past, I feel quite uncertain, or I feel quite an imposter as well in this case. And the way I actually reframe this situation, and I also teach my coaching clients this technique, is simply this, right? I tell myself, as long as I'm 2 to 3 steps ahead, okay, as long as I'm 2 to 3 steps ahead of the people that I'm serving, that is good enough, right? As long as I'm 2 to 3 steps ahead of the people that I'm serving, that is good enough. Because I don't need to know everything, right? I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to know everything. As long as I know more than the people that I'm serving, okay, I'm the subject matter expert over here, and I can be considered an authority in the subject itself. Are there things I don't know? Yeah, sure. There are things that I don't know. Do I lie that I know them if I'm being challenged? I don't, right? If I don't know them, I say, I don't know. Let's do some research. Let's find out. Why don't you give me some additional time? Let me figure this out. So I'm not sure what expectation this organization has of you, or has anyone in the organization started challenging you and questioning your ability. I hope that has not happened yet. But if you are not meeting resistance, if you're not sensing that anyone in the organization is doubting your ability, or have expressed in a very outward manner that they are doubting your ability, please do not give yourself the added pressure that you're not enough. Okay, so let me just put it on record and say you are enough. You have a job. You're one of a very lucky few who's hired in the practice of UX design. So just continue to improve yourself and continue to kind of upskill yourself and continue to do your best to serve your organization who has placed that trust in you. Okay, so I hope that answered your question, DP. And you also asked another question. So let me try and answer the other question. And if anyone has questions for me while I'm answering them, feel free to also ask and clarify. We're getting a few more people join the call. Thank you so much, and some old friends as well. All right. So someone mentioned I have started my career as a UX researcher. Okay, and DP, whom we know, was the character from earlier. And he feels like he's a one-trick pony. Okay, and that this is a job that can be done by other people and is quite replaceable because UX research isn't very hard to pick up, at least at the basic level. Okay, that is something I'd like to clarify. UX research can be really deep and a very important part of what we do, not just in user experience design, but let me elaborate later. So let me finish reading what you're saying. So DP mentioned he wants to move to something more of a generalist and not just research, but perhaps ideation and solutioning as well. UI is not your strength. Do you think I should take a leap and pick up more hard skills, or play to my strengths and focus on that if I were to make a transition? How would you advise I do it? Okay, lots of questions in this one paragraph or a couple of paragraphs being typed over here. Okay, first of all, let's explore this topic called UX research. Okay, user experience research is the process that is part of the user experience design process, right? It happens before we do any type of design, right? And it is important in its own because the purpose and the function of research is not just to collect data. And when we talk about collecting data, that's collecting qualitative and quantitative data. But at the same time, it's also to analyze data, right? So the reason why I say it's really hard to master is because the analysis is the really hard part, right? How do we present data that's very contextual to our stakeholders? For example, if you have data from your users, how do you make it contextual to your marketing stakeholder? How do you make that contextual to your product manager? How do you make that contextual to your visual designer? It means as a UX researcher, you need to understand what your product managers, what your marketing stakeholder, what your visual designers kind of care about. At least on some level, you need to understand what do they care about. You know, how do you make that appropriate recommendation? So I've talked to Sarah Coe from Indeed.com, and she serves as someone who's helping us with curriculum advisory, and I think after our conversation we both agree, like if there's one thing that people should get better at if they want to be good at UX design, is to be better at UX research, because it's a very difficult thing to master. Right. UX research isn't just like the boot camps teaching you like, hey, you just do your affinity map and you just do your persona and that's about it. No, that's not at all what UX research is. Right? There's so much more to it. There's so much about like framing the right questions. There's so much about the recruiting process. There's so much about, you know, like eliminating biases in your research. And all those things, I wouldn't admit I'm a subject matter expert in this, right? So I think there's just so much to pick up, and there's just so much to learn from books and all these different things. So let me set the record straight by saying it is something that is worth mastering, and is something that not every UX designer is very good at, okay? And I'll say analysis as well, because analysis requires critical thinking. And critical thinking is not something that has been drilled in our current system. Oops, I think I need to close it. All right, so let me set that. I think I'm getting some questions. All right, thanks, Adrian. Yep, there's a lot of techniques involved. Okay, even though the boot camps do cover some of it, but it's something that's very, very deep that you can go into. Now, I don't have enough context to give you a suggestion, but based on what you shared, I always advocate that people play on their strengths. I always advocate for that. I don't think people should be way too general. It's good to know and it's good to read widely, so you kind of build that T-shaped competency. But I think without actually having mastered UX research based on what you described to me in your earlier question, I wouldn't ask you to start, like going wide or going too wide. I will actually ask you to double down and focus, since you are hired as a UX researcher. If I'm hired for any role, one of the things I always tell myself is, how can I be like top 10% in what I'm doing, right? And what does a top 10%, what does a top 10 percenter looks like in that specific role? So when I was doing marketing, I asked myself, hey, what does a top 10 percenter look like in marketing? When I was in product management, what does a top 10 percenter look like? And after understanding that, I look at the profiles of people who I consider the top 10 percenter, or do other people consider a top 10 percenter, and then just kind of work and bridge that gap that I feel I have between me and them, either by reading books or by going for courses or by interacting with them in person or communities like that, just to improve myself. So it's a constant journey of learning, so no doubt about that. And yeah, so I don't think there's anything you need to do. You can continue being a UX researcher and build some depth and expertise and be recognized for it. I think the wonderful thing about UX research is that it taps into quite a number of disciplines, including, like more traditional social science disciplines, like psychology and all that. So that's just so much body of work and research and knowledge to read. I'm not even sure if you can finish that in 1 year. So like, just go really, really deep into it, have fun, and try and specialize in something that you feel you can add a lot of value to your organization. I think the most challenging thing, if you're the only researcher in your organization, is to justify the value of your role. So you constantly need to demonstrate that and be able to deliver impact. So your insights, your analysis, helping your organization and your team to forecast, and helping your organization and team to understand historical data, all of that can come into play. So you can even consider picking up, data analytics and how to be better at that. So that would be my general advice. Okay, that's been a long-winded answer, but I hope I answered a few questions from what's written. And for those of you who just joined us on Facebook or Zoom, welcome. Feel free to post your questions over on the chat, as I'm answering questions for the next 30 minutes or so. Okay, so I'm kind of following up to the next question. Okay, this one was asked about a week ago. Okay, TK says, I started a job as a UI UX designer in a small agile tech startup, and I'm the only UX and UI designer on the team. Okay, that's also a very common phenomenon. No experience in this field except for my 2-day course. Okay, that's interesting. And some self-learning. I intend to learn as much as possible, but somehow I feel, okay, I think I answered the imposter syndrome question earlier. So, right. Okay, so I'll answer the second part, which is not the imposter syndrome question. What advice would you give someone in my position, especially things which a junior like me might overlook? Okay, so I empathize with you. It's really hard to grow without having a senior designer or a manager to help you out, or to tell you what to do, right? It's really tough. So I would suggest to pick your battles, right, in general, and to prioritize what is important to the organization, because you only have your own time to control. You can't do everything. You can't serve everyone. You can't answer every question that your organization poses to you as a UX designer, or even help facilitate and solve every problem. you try your best to do that, but you need to master prioritization, right? Because that's the beauty of working in an agile, small tech startup. In this case, I would suggest you work with your product owner if you have a product owner. If not, it's likely your CEO, who's the product owner, or your CTO, who's the product owner. And just kind of prioritize what are some of the important things where you can deliver high impact, but really, really little effort in the next 90 days, right? And just kind of every 90 days, just keep asking that question. Or if your startup is working a lot faster, then maybe every 30 days you ask that question and you get in a room together with your CTO and your CEO and just make sure that you're prioritizing and working on the most important things. Okay, so that is one. I think one of the more common mistakes junior designers make, I think, is to, I would say, I don't exactly remember who you are, so I'm not sure what your skills gap are, like whether it's in research or design. So I think one of the constraints in a startup is resources, right? So I'll try, I mean, especially important things like research, data collection, or even trying, or it might be even visual design, right? So depending on where you're better at, I think it's really difficult to try and specialize on everything and be productive on everything. So I might actually look at only kind of playing to my strengths if I were in your position. Back then when I was a product manager or a product designer, I was doing more research, I was doing more product related stuff. So kind of just play on your strengths and those things that you think you're not very strong at, understand what is good enough, right? Don't try and sort of overpromise. Like if you're not a good visual designer, don't overpromise like you're gonna like deliver the moon or something like that. So that's another thing I would suggest that you seriously consider and look at, and not overstretch yourself, because often I run a startup too. I mean, there's the risk of overstretching yourself. Okay. Yeah. So as a junior, once again, don't forget to continue learning. Get into communities, attend talks, try and talk to more senior people, see if you can get a mentor or even get some time from someone overseas who's slightly more experienced than you. I recall when I was in an enterprise, I actually tap into the resources of the knowledgeable people in the enterprise, and I just talk to them and I say, hey, how do you do your job better as a product manager? Can you just share with me like your experience? And I think people love sharing their experience, especially if they've been in the industry for a while. So I'm going to give ADP List a plug over here and say, hey, ADP List has like a lot of mentors over there. Just like reach out to some of them and see if someone's willing to mentor you and give some time back. Okay. So I hope I answered your question, TK. Okay, got some additional questions in the Zoom chat from Irani. So Irani is aspiring UX designer. Would you suggest a newbie to find a company with an established team, or join a new one with room to explore? I think it's definitely, it depends. Like I say, I think in general, the rule of thumb for new jobs is to be able to, deliver impact and add value to your organization, right? So in any case, you should always put learning before earning. Okay, let me type in chat, learning before earning. This was a very important advice that was given to me by my mentor when I was in my early 20s. And he said, Daylon, if you look at the amount of money you're going to earn in your 40s in 1 or 2 years, it's going to probably be the equivalent of what you earn in 10 years in your 20s. And then he told me his salary. And I'm like, okay, I believe you. All right. So it might not happen to everyone. I'm not saying it does, but if you look at it, it kind of makes sense, right? Like you're kind of not paid very well in your 20s, and you're just like building your skills, or you're new to an industry, you're just kind of like starting out. So that's I think the focus should be on your learning, on trying to get better at your craft, and then earning will come later. So you can join a team. There's a really good UX manager, very experienced, work on multiple tech products and knows like different things. And if you can tell, right? Like when you go into an interview, like this person asked you really hard questions, and you're like, oh shucks, like I feel kind of nervous, like answering these questions. I don't exactly know whether I answered it correctly. You can kind of tell, like, and if it's not just him, right? Even if it's like a junior team member, like while they're doing like team interview, it's like asking you such tough questions. Like this is like a good team. This is like a team that is going to like really challenge you, is really going to like stretch you, and you're going to like learn so much, right? So I like, personally for me, I like joining teams where I'm kind of the dumbest person in the room, so I can learn from everyone. But it really depends on your preference. In general, if you're new to your career, do consider just putting learning before your earning. So I hope I answered your question, Irani. Okay, we have another question from Reishi. Not sure if those of you who are on Facebook could see my Zoom chat. So Reishi said, I want to switch to UX design. Okay, yep, popular option right now. Could you share what employers look for in terms of skills, qualification, and certification? Is there a minimum requirement? Okay, that's a really big question, very general as well. If we look at the JDs, okay, if we look at the job descriptions, employers often want someone with experience. Okay, employers often want someone with experience, and sometimes they just put 3 years experience there. Okay, and that really intimidates a lot of people, especially if they've just been through a boot camp or they've just been through a course, and they're like, how the hell am I going to get 3 years of experience when I haven't even like got started? Okay, so I say that is definitely a bar that the recruiters set so that they attract the most experienced candidates, right? If your portfolio demonstrates the same level as an experienced candidate, right, and that you enter the interview and you can answer the questions like an experienced candidate, okay, there's no reason why they would not hire you. Okay, there's no reason why they would not offer you the job. And I can tell from experience, because we've coached our batch 1 students, right? So 6 of our batch 1 students, half of them got hired, right? 2 of them got hired before they even graduated. So that's just training. That's not magic. That's not certificates, right? It's definitely portfolio. We drill them a lot on that. But that's just like training. That's just drilling. So if you ask me skills, generally I think and this might be a little bit different from different UX managers. And you can check out some of our past videos to look at what UX managers generally look out for. I'll say critical thinking or problem solving will be the number 1 skill, right? Will be the number 1 skill that I look out for, and from what I heard, other UX managers look out for. Okay, so that how do you demonstrate you have that? Okay, it's simple. Google used to ask very challenging trivia questions, and they see like whether you're able to adapt and answer them. I don't think Google does that anymore. But if they ask you a very hard question that requires you to think critically, then you kind of know like they're trying to test your critical thinking, right? Whether they're and generally, I'll say my number 1 tip for you when answering a critical thinking question is number one, work with what you know. Number two, understand what are the assumptions. What are the assumptions being presented? And my tip number three is to evidence before opinion. Okay, so if you have questions around critical thinking, just be very mindful. Like, I think a common mistake, as we've been doing a ton of mock interviews for our coaching clients, is that a lot of them still use their opinion, and sometimes I have to correct them. The mock interviewers correct them as well, so they don't make the same mistake outside when they're doing their real job interview. So make sure you have some evidence. It's also a very common mistake I see as I'm teaching in the university and I'm teaching in the polytechnics. So lots of assumptions, lots of opinions, not great. Okay, you don't want to appear like you're just using your opinion. Okay, an example of that is like if they ask you, why did you choose that color? Right? Why did you choose this particular color scheme? And the answer is not because it looks nice. Right? That is a really poor answer. So you should kind of back that up, hopefully with some research that you have previously done, or at least explain that you have a conceptual rationale of why you chose the color, indeed. So it could be as simple as that to test your critical thinking. Okay, so that's the number one skill. It requires drilling, unfortunately. It requires a good coach to help you out in this process. Unfortunately, not every qualification or course that I see out there drills this skill. Okay, and it's kind of a lot of undoing of our factory education system. So it's quite unfortunate. It's the hardest skill to acquire. Okay, the second thing, I think generally most UX design teams look out for is your spirit of collaboration. And I don't mean just being generally a nice person, right? That's not exactly what they're looking at only. So yes, don't be someone that's difficult to work with, or don't be a diva for sure. But when we talk about collaboration, they want to understand, can you play as a team, right? Will you actually give up if things get hard? Because things are going to get hard, right? Every UX team in an organization is always lean. Okay, let's start with that assumption. Unless you're joining like a big team like DBS but even DBS is like considering the proportion of designers to the number of employees they have a lot of problems to solve as well. So you should always join a team with the assumption that, hey, this is going to be a lean team, right? So this is like a commando team, right? You're joining the commandos. And if you're joining the commandos, you don't want to go in and just kind of like expect an easy job. So being collaborative means you're there in the trenches. You're kind of like helping your colleague out. Sometimes you have to do the wireframes, even though you're a researcher, that's fine, right? Sometimes you have to do additional things, maybe for your product owner, just so the entire team can ship the product out. So go with that spirit of like, I want to collaborate, I want to help, I want to deliver value, I want to like show impact in my work. And they're going to test you for that. They're going to see like if you have historical evidence of you doing that, of you being able to prove that you can work in a team, you can actually deliver as a team, and what kind of impact have you delivered. If you're slightly more senior, right, as a UX manager, they'll start asking you, how have you led and influenced UX in your organization? So they'll look at how your team members deliver value and deliver impact. So I think generally this is not an easy thing to demonstrate, especially if you work previously in an organization that is very siloed. So you only do your own thing, right? You don't collaborate. You don't update anything. Maybe you only update stuff once a month, maybe. So that's quite unnatural, which is the reason why there's such a different working culture when you work in a tech company, right? generally in a tech company, yes, you're working longer hours, but you're solving problems, you know, based on evidence, on data. You're kind of like being very collaborative. You're kind of like knowledge sharing constantly. You know, you're correcting your assumptions, you're cost correcting. So it's a very different working culture than, say, a traditional organization. And that's how we design our programs as well. People go through 4 months with us. They work with 4 real clients. So 1 month is very, very short. It's very tight for people. So that's those are the 2 things I'll generally try and demonstrate I have competency in, other than having a good portfolio. Okay, so if you're looking at tips of how to have a good portfolio, we do have the free resources. If you go to our free webinars, and I'll paste the link in a bit, I have a curated section over here. So if you go all the way to portfolio reviews, you'll be able to see all the portfolio review webinars. Okay, so I hope that would help. Or you can email me after this, and I'm happy to send you a portfolio guide. Okay, just email our school. Happy to send you a portfolio guide. Okay, got another question from Zoom. So someone's asking me, is there a value in training myself to be a UX designer and also good in front-end development? Is it better to be a specialist? You just started out as a UX designer. Thanks, Clifford. I mean, yeah, Clifford's an ex-student. I'm asking because I understand this is a particularly useful skill. I think it depends on what you would like to specialize in. So if you are on a trajectory, let's say your career goal is to be a product manager. Okay, let's say your career goal is to be a product manager. I think it's great that you pick up front-end development and that you already know UX design. Okay, then the next thing is just business skills. So if that is your career ambition and that's what you're interested in, and you're interested in influencing people and herding cats, as we say, yeah, then that could be a potential option. The other option, which is a path that one of my ex-classmates in design school took, he was a front-end designer, right? So he started his own company before. And he did like a lot of web design projects for people. He was even part of one of the more prominent ad agencies here. Today, he's a front-end designer. I hope I didn't butcher his job title. I think he's a front-end designer at Google in California, not Singapore, in the San Francisco office or the New York office. I can't exactly remember. So his path was to really specialize in front end, right? He wanted to be a good engineer, but he also had the chops and good design sensibility, which I think it is why he was hired for his position. So that could be a specialization, front-end engineer, front-end designer. That could be a very specific specialization that you could get good at. And I think there's people who want to hire people like that. And there's always good jobs available in tech. So yeah, it really depends what you enjoy. I don't think you ever go wrong if you're always like sense checking with yourself. Hey, I enjoy the research process, or I enjoy the design process. And depending on what you enjoy, you just decide to spend more time and be interested in it. And I think that would serve you very well if you're always following what you enjoy and what you're passionate about, right? Because like 8 hours a day, right? At least 8 hours a day is not easy. If you're putting in the hours, then might as well be something that you enjoy doing. Okay, so you're welcome. Really great questions, and time has flew. 40 minutes have passed. So, okay, let me answer a few more questions. Let's see. Okay, we got some questions from. We got some questions from the Ask Me Anything blog posts. Okay. Adrian says he works as a product manager, looking to improve myself in research techniques and design software. Considering a move to UX research and notice the little things that not everyone might notice. What are things that I should focus on learning and improving? So Adrian, I think if you have a UX researcher, if you have the benefit of a UX researcher in your organization, please have lunch with him or her and just kind of like learn, or just say, hey, can I shadow you? Like, can I, when you're doing your user interviews, can I just shadow you? When you're doing your user testing, can I just shadow you? Right. And I'll just kind of like see, hey, can I help you with your analysis work? Right. And just volunteer your time to improve on that. If you're, and I guarantee you being good at UX research is going to make you a better product manager. Right. Because what is the job of a product manager? To serve the customers and the users, right? And to make sure that every decision being made also makes business sense and technical sense, right? So I guarantee you, if you get good at UX research, everything else also improve, right? You get better at communication, you get better at asking good questions, and you get to be a little bit more critical. You can think maybe quite far ahead because you're familiar with the data set that the researcher is working with. So that's on the job. So outside of your job, I would say you can potentially learn from people who are very specialized in UX research. There are some really great events in Europe that are being organized around user experience, right? And I'm talking like really high quality events. These are like people with doctorates in research and what they do. So they are like sharing, and these are people who write books, right? Like, can you imagine like the person who wrote 100 things every designer should know about people actually like was speaking in one of the events I attended. So yeah, you should like just like invest some money. My strategy is always to invest about 10% of my income to upgrade myself and to learn. That strategy has worked well for me, and I've seen gains in my own salary income and all that. Okay, but I'm not on that career path anymore. Like now I'm running my own business. So I would say that is something I would do outside of work. I would read books. And if you're not sure what book you should start with, you can start with Just Enough Research. Okay, Just Enough Research by Erica Hall. That would be a good book to start with. And we have it under the recommended section as well, right? We've compiled some really wonderful resources. This was my ex-intern, Jing Xiu, and I, we came together and we were like, okay, this is good, this is not good. We put together everything over here. So all the books we recommend here, some of them we actually give it to our coaching clients. And some of them, yeah, we've definitely read it ourselves, okay? So consider tapping onto that. I hope I answered your question, Adrian. Okay. Oh, okay. And if you're asking specifically about research and maybe the attributes of research, I'll say listening skills. Listening skills and questioning skills are the most important things. Okay. So that would be my advice. Okay. What do you think using unmoderated instead of moderated user testing? Okay. And strengths or weaknesses for using it as based on. Okay, so I'm gonna make some assumptions over here, GD. So I'm gonna assume that your unmoderated testing means like you put the instructions there, right? And then you ask the user to go through the test on their own, right? Either you're using maze.design or Optimal Workshop or one of the software. So that's my assumption. Huh? And moderated means like you have someone who's briefing the participant and sort of like prompting them and looking at what they're doing. Okay, so there are definitely strengths and weakness in both cases. I would say we have successfully conducted moderated user testing in our client projects for our students who are in our coaching program. We have successfully conducted that even during COVID. Okay, the way we do it is to use Zoom. So we send a prototype link to the person who's the tester, and we ask them to share their screen. And then we looked at their expression, and we kind of brief them as we would do in a face-to-face moderated session. And yeah, we just kind of like look at their expression, look at where they're struggling, and record the entire session. Okay, so I think there's an advantage in doing moderated because you can prompt your users. In some countries, people are not very good at speaking out loud and sharing what they think about something. So if you have a moderated session, you have context about what people are doing, right? You understand the why. If you have an unmoderated session, you understand the what and what they are doing, but you may not understand the why. Okay, they may not explain it unless you have a survey question at the end, but maybe they will it's not very as accurate as like just asking them directly, you know, like, yeah, you know, what's going through your mind right now. It's very contextual at that point in time. Okay, so I hope that gives you a general answer. It's also the same reason why I tell my students, like, don't just do surveys, right? Surveys can tell you there are advantages of doing surveys. You can reach more people and things like that. But you understand the what, but you don't understand the why, right? So you need that context, and therefore that's why you need to do user interviews. You need to do user testing, and you can even combine user testing with like some interview questions. Okay. Okay. Yes, we train all our students and coaching clients on how to do remote user research and design. So that's an important skill that you need to have if you want to work as a UX designer now. Do you recommend any company? I'm assuming that you're asking me about companies that allow you to do the software research. I don't know. I'm just assuming it's that. If you're asking for courses, I think that's pretty obvious, but I mean, this was recommended by our friends at Grab. Jay at Grab recommended this. I was like, okay, great. In fact, we subscribe to it. Our students have started using it. The other one which we use for, well, I mean, we use Zoom as well. So if you're asking about software, that's about software. Okay. Great. Hope I answered your question, GD. All right, one of the last questions. I think there were some questions that people were asking about that I already answered. Like I say, it's not about certificates. Okay, it's never about certificates. It's about your portfolio. This is a practical skill. This is a technical skill. Yes, the certificate may interest someone in taking a second look at your CV, but it's not going to guarantee you a job. All right, let's just put it that way. So let's see. Do we have a question before I go to my email question? Okay, Irani asked, based on the current industry trend in the company, the UX team is asked to help improve the internal business software or generally geared towards helping clients and customers. I think one of the beautiful things, Irani, if I can rephrase your question, you know, what is the value of UX in today's business and tomorrow's business, right? I think one of the beautiful things about learning UX design is that it's a meta skill, right? What do we call a meta skill? A meta skill is like communication is a meta skill. Leadership is a meta skill. So if you have this skill, you can solve problems in very different ways from people. You look at things very differently and you can empathize with customers. So I would say generally, it depends on how niche and what is the company strategy and how niche your role is. I'll say in general, if your organization is focused on their digital product strategy and they've hired a bunch of people in tech to ramp up their tech products, they generally wouldn't ask their UX designers to solve operational problems. They may ask their UX designers to give some workshops or some talks so that non-designers can learn. But it's very unlikely that you'll be asked to rope in because there's so much to do, right? As I said, you're already in a very lean team. But in some organizations, there is a push and a focus on customer centricity, right? So we're helping our client, Prudential, right now with improving their customer centricity in Malaysia. So they've asked us to for some help around that area. And actually, even when I was delivering the course for them, there were people who were involved in marketing. There were people who were involved in operations. So they've actually applied what I taught in their respective jobs and their field. So like I say, this is a meta skill, right? Once you learn it, it stays with you for life, for your entire career. You can use it to solve problems in any way. So I hope I answered your question. It really depends on what the business strategy is and how well resourced your company is. Okay. Right, one of the last few questions. Time has really flew by. I think my vocal coach is asking me not to strain my vocal cords. Okay, so thank you, Leanne, for asking this question. Come from a background in psychology and economics, and you wrote this in as a comment, so it's public, so I'm just kind of covering it over here. Want to do UX research, but couldn't find the opportunity. Went into healthcare research, honed my research skills while waiting for UX research to mature. Okay, good move. Now I'm ready. Okay, great. And how mature is the UX research industry now? Okay, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, Lian. Unfortunately, not many companies are hiring UX researchers in Singapore. Okay, I can give you some data around it. So in our last batch, which is we trained 6 people, 2 of them are very talented researchers. In fact, I asked both of them to tell other people when they're in their job interviews to kind of say, hey, this is my core competency. This is like my skill. And there was some difficulty in them sort of like finding, pure UX research roles. Okay. And it is not unusual because I think until a company reaches a certain maturity, they wouldn't hire a specialized UX researcher. Okay. And I think with your background in psychology, I think it puts you in a good position to be with an added advantage, but you will still need to build up, your portfolio and capabilities of how you translate, say, your knowledge in psychology or what you've been doing in healthcare research. How do you apply that in, say, digital product research? Okay, so I've been through the process of coaching someone who is in a very similar background as you are. And I think it's about really contextualizing that information. I think the biggest danger is that for you to join a bootcamp and then they train you up as a UX designer from scratch and they tell you to be a generalist, I think that would be really sad, right? In fact, the strategy that our graduate Charlene has adopted, I mean, you can look at her portfolio on our website. It's all under the graduates section. So in fact, the strategy that she decided to adopt and approach was actually to contextualize her past work experience into something that is relevant. Right, so all the research methods that she used and how that was done. She just contextualized it. She described the problem and then like her solution, why she chose the research method. So it doesn't seem like she's a fresh graduate. It doesn't seem like she's a new UX designer, but she's someone with like the necessary research experience and the necessary portfolio to demonstrate that she has learned how to apply her skills or is competent enough to apply her skills. Okay, so that would be my general advice. And yeah, like some of you have been hearing me say this a lot. If you can avoid being a generalist, but yes, it's unfortunate that right now most of the job titles are just UX designers. Okay, but there is value. There are some niche positions that open up, and if you're able to get a position, you, as a specialist, you can negotiate for a higher salary. Okay, unspoken rule for UX design candidates to have UX portfolio. Yes, not an unspoken rule. This is a must. Okay. How widely is this practice? Okay, like as I said, this is a must. All right. If you don't have a portfolio, you don't get an interview. What do they look out for in a researcher's portfolio? Okay, so I would say if you can, I'm not sure if it's password protected. You can definitely look at Ivy's portfolio or Charlene's portfolio. They are more research centric. I wouldn't go as far as saying watch this specific webinar. Right, watch this specific webinar where me and Sigit, right, Sigit and I kind of broke down his portfolio. Like he has some really good stuff in his portfolio. Okay, so I would encourage you to watch that webinar if you haven't. So that is my tip. Specifically preparing for a UX research portfolio, I would say reference from them. I don't have a UX research portfolio. So that would be my advice. Okay, I hope I answered your question, Deanne. Wow, it's already 1 hour. Okay, let's see. All right, cool. Wow, what a session tonight. It's been 1 hour. Do we have any final questions from the crowd? Let me just take a moment to take a sip of water. Yep. Okay. Cool. Looks like we answered all questions tonight. I'm not sure if there's any on Facebook. If you ask your question on Facebook and I didn't answer them, feel free to type it over here. Anyway, that's the end of the session tonight. Please type in chat. Was this a useful session? Like, should we do another session like this in sometime in future? Maybe not every month, maybe like every 3 months or something. Yeah. Wow. Thanks, Griselda. I don't know where you're dialing in from, but I'm glad it's useful for people who are dialing in from outside of Asia Pacific. Spain. Oh, wow. It's great. Hello. Yes, learning before earning. That's my mantra. Super useful. Oh, that's great. Okay, I'm glad so many of you found the session. Well, if you like this session, do me the favor of please sharing this page, right? Sharing the Ask Me Anything page so more people can ask questions if they want to. Okay, including yourself. So we'll answer some of these questions in future. And of course, like if you can share about our event on your LinkedIn, that would be great. Hello from Singapore. Lovely, lovely. This is great. So that's it for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are tuning in on the live stream, wish you all the best in your career. And of course, next week, you'll see me playing the role of an interviewer again. Hopefully that doesn't strain my vocal cords. So I'll catch you next week then. Take care.